Where's my snare? I have no snare in my headphones. There you go.
Yo! What up, everyone?
Sadu.
Welcome to the Sailor Jerry Saturdays Fantasy Football Show. This is the Week 10 recap. I'm here again with my boys, Josh and Jake. What up, boys?
What's up?
What it do?
How you guys doing today?
Not too
It's your
bad.
boy Jake One coming to you
Coming to
live
you
with
live with my headband on.
Here sitting with Kyrus and J Mo, sipping on some dew and smacking some
Back in
hoes.
some O's, biatch.
In today's industry, you guys could probably legitimately be rappers. Like,
We've
you
been
seriously might have
rappers,
a
dude.
shot. I'm just
Today's
saying,
industry.
yeah, like, you don't even need to rap. You guys should just, get a SoundCloud and go for it.
We have a SoundCloud.
I know, I'm just messing with you. All right, so let's jump right into it. First matchup of the week is the number 3 versus the number 1 team. Absolute Units versus Gotcha Thielen Gurley. Josh, why don't you go ahead and break that end result down for us? Any surprises for you there?
Yeah, I was surprised you won, considering your team is trash. But then again, Dorf's team's not that good. All year he's been riding Todd Gurley and Adam Thielen, and the week he loses, what do you know? Thielen's on a bye. He only had Gurley, who was his second highest scorer, 4 points behind his highest scorer, Matt Ryan. But then the rest of his squad was pretty sad, pretty sorry. Robert Woods didn't do much in a game where the Rams scored 36 points. He only had 4 catches. Larry Fitzgerald at 72 years old. It's going to be hard to trust him week in and week out. Tavon Coleman,
Larry
who's
Legend.
been there. Jack Doyle in an offense where he's been banged up all year, and Eric Ebron scored 3 touchdowns. Funchess, Hopkins, Carolina gave him negative points. On the other side, Keith got lucky, really. It was Ezekiel Elliott and his huge night on Sunday.
Yeah.
Those 35.5 points won the game for you. The rest of your team,
Truly
really
did.
not that strong. I mean, Russ had a really big day, which was needed because the rest of your team just crapped the bed. Really shocked by the egg not a complete egg, but the performance that the Patriots put up. I wouldn't say I'm
I know.
shocked because I told y'all, if you go back and you check, that Tennessee's defense, is nothing to sleep on. And then on top of that, Mariota's healthy. So I'm not surprised that Tennessee won that game. I'm just surprised that the Patriots only put up 10 points, expecting a little bit more offense for them. But, all in all, it was a good win for Keith. It brought Dan back a little bit. He's still the 1 seed, but only by a game now. It tightens up the race here going into the final stretch of the season. But both these teams, I don't think will be contending for a championship when it's all said and done.
Okay.
Wow,
Fair
that's
enough.
a bold statement.
I mean, I did watch that Patriots-Tennessee game, and that was one of, I don't know, it was an anomaly because Tom was literally on his back a lot that game.
Yeah.
They really stifled that Patriots offense. That was surprising to me.
Well, another thing to consider that you do have to take into account is that they're going against Mike Vrabel, who played and was part of the Patriots organization for a long time.
Right.
And then you look
yeah.
back earlier in the season when they lost to Detroit, Matt Patricia, head
yeah.
coach. You know what I mean? So they know the Patriot way. They know what they like to do. So I think they have a little bit of an advantage. But again, 34-10 was a little bit of
Yeah.
a surprise. And I think you're starting to see the decline of Tom Brady. Now, every time somebody says that, every time they go on ESPN or on Twitter and some big profile broadcasters will start talking about the end of Tom, he'll come out and throw for 500 yards and 5
Right.
touchdowns.
Right.
So that's where you got to be careful. But I mean, in all seriousness, not only was he on his back, but some of the throws that he was making.
Yeah, they were not crisp at all.
No, you didn't see the same velocity
No.
that you've seen throughout his career. So I mean, hey, Father
That's why
Time's
he's
undefeated,
the
man.
dump down king. And
Yeah,
that's why James
check down
White gets
champion.
8 catches a game.
Well, James White didn't help Keith this week, so
No, he
Keith
didn't.
got a little lucky there.
That's
Nope.
true.
No. Well,
He
yeah.
still had
Tom
like
said
5
it-
catches, but he
Yeah.
didn't do much.
He didn't
much
do
with it.
anything with it. Tom's heading into a bye week right now, so we'll see what happens on the other side.
Yep.
Okay, next matchup would be the 9 versus 5th seed. That would be Don Juan 08 versus Hank Mardukas. Hank Mardukas came out with the W on that one. Go ahead and roll with it, Jake.
Yes, I would love to go over the matchup of Chubb versus Smallwood.
Oh yeah, this is
Now,
Dick's game.
Now, it was a strong matchup. Chubb against Johnson was a tough matchup. Neck to neck, head to head, if you know what I mean, shaft to shaft.
Yeah, and there you go.
But it was, I mean, Kinto put up good numbers. He just ran into a really, really good week for Nico. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger I think he had a perfect QB rating against Carolina. They just destroyed him. He had 5 TDs. I think he had like 3 incomplete passes. He was just unreal in that game. Ended up putting up 49. But still only 12 points ahead of Drew Brees, but obviously that adds up. From there, he was pretty much even position-wise all the way down to the flex. The main difference besides the QB was Corey Davis went off for Tennessee that you were just talking about, that Titans game. Davis went off, good. Which we knew he was their best wide receiver to begin with. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 21 compared to McGuire for the Jets, who got dismantled by the Bills. Only put up 7. Yeah. So besides those 2 matchups, the QB and that flex there, it was pretty much even. Everywhere else, I mean, the kicker put up more points, but Don Juan's defense put up more points than Nico's. But obviously Hank Mardukas put up some big numbers this week. 172. David Johnson finally came out. I just traded to him. Great trade.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't trade him in the other league though, so we're good.
He finally put up numbers like he was doing that one season.
98 rushing yards, 85 receiving, 7 catches, 2 touchdowns.
Big injury for Nico. He loses Cup for the rest of the year.
That's true.
Cooper's gone.
What did he tear in ACL?
Non-contact injury.
Yeah, I believe it was an ACL.
So he's out.
He's got Sutton and he's got Collins on the bench.
Sutton's not.
He got Davis though.
Marshall.
Throw Davis up there in the wide receiver. Put Sutton.
Davis and Jones is still going to be strong, but the problem is he doesn't really have depth to fill in that flex position. And when you're starting Wendell Smallwood as your second running back, I mean, Collins off the bench really isn't that much of an insurance policy. So I think Nico's a little thin, and he's probably 1 core injury away from being in serious trouble. But, I mean, he has 2 stud quarterbacks fantasy-wise that will put up numbers. David Johnson could put up 34 every week, and Julio can do the same. So he does have big scorers. Do you
think that the outburst from David Johnson was because of the new coaching, or was it because they just went against Kansas City?
Absolutely. Well, not necessarily, because they only put up 14 points of total offense. David Johnson only had 98 rushing yards and a touchdown. Part of that big day was the 7 catches and the receiving yards to go with it as well. And obviously in a PPR league, and that's right, he caught the receiving touchdown too. So I think it's more so coaching, because Byron Leftwich, who's calling the plays now, was Bruce Arians' understudy for the last few years when David Johnson was the centerpiece of that offense, and they actually had a lot of success.
I mean, I think before that he was averaging like 3 targets a game, and he had like 9 this game.
Yeah, they were just trying to like pound him inside and turn him into that kind of running back, which he's not. He's much more versatile.
Well, it's not that he's not that type of running back. It's just it's a different system, and the Arizona Cardinals are not that good. So, I mean, what do you want to do when you're running behind a makeshift O-line? You really don't have any weapons on the outside. You got to get creative. Teams can load the box. Exactly. You got to get creative, and you got to do what Bruce Arians did the last few years. Put him out in the slot. Put him out in motion. Get him running routes, man. For a running back, and for a bigger guy, like if you watch David Johnson run, he's very strong, but he's got very good feet, very good footwork. He's in great hands too, so he's a great pass catching running back, and you got to utilize that when the previous coaches weren't. So I think it's more so for the coaching, not really the opponent.
Word.
Yeah.
All right.
Next matchup here is the Toilet Bowl.
Yeah.
Blue Jesus Chicken Wing versus the Bald Steve All Stars, and we were all rooting for the chicken wing hype train to keep on chugging along, and it looks like that simply wasn't the case. Andy
upset.
Yeah, Andy Dalton versus Tom Brady. Andy Dalton just, became Andy Dalton. He did what he usually does and disappeared versus the Saints. They lost 51-14. Wow. That's just... I would be embarrassed. And he probably is embarrassed.
Their DC got fired after the game.
Well, there you go. So they were embarrassed. And Amari Cooper versus Sterling Shepard, wash. Danny Amendola versus Kenny Golladay. Kenny got the nod on it. Matt Breida actually did very well for Casey. Monday night,
Kareem Hunt. How much did he
Hunt,
put up? Like 30?
27. And then what happened for Balls Deep All-Stars is the Kareem Hunt versus Leonard Fournette matchup. Leonard finally gets on the field, and he had a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So, and Kareem Hunt, he just didn't. Their offense is still explosive. He just wasn't a part of it. And I think that's part of, obviously you want any part you can have of the Kansas City offense, but you're also taking calculated risk because at any one Sunday, any one player can go off and then the three other players might have a mediocre day.
Yeah, but that's where I got to beg to differ because I don't think it was an issue of him having to share his touches. He got 16 rushing attempts, and I believe he had 2 or 3 catches as well. And, if you look at his rushing attempts throughout the season, talking about Kareem Hunt, starting from week 1, 16, 18, 18, 19, 22, 10, 15, 16, 17, and then 16 this past week. Same amount of touches. Exactly. He had 71 rushing yards, just wasn't bad. He had a couple of catches, too. He just didn't score, and
right.
It was a tougher game.
Yeah, he didn't score in the passing game, which the previous 1, 2, 3, 4 games he had a touchdown receiving.
Yeah, and he had a touchdown streak going all the way back to week 2, whether it was rushing or receiving. So I think it was just a matter of he didn't get in the end zone this week because, again,
he gets put up double digits. But
right, and if he gets in the end zone,
week.
He hits 16 and change. You figure that's an extra touch or an extra catch, give him an extra point, and he's right around his projection.
Who scored the bulk of the points in that game? I think it was Tyreek Hill at 2.
Tyreek went off.
Boy, I told you he was overdue. I told you.
Yeah, But that's what I mean. 1 week, Tyreek will have 2 touchdowns. The next week it'll be Travis, and then the next week, Kareem Hunt will have 3.
Yeah, but every week they're getting about 4 to 5 touchdowns on average, which is just ludicrous in the NFL. So, if you have any one of those players on your team, you feel good every week.
Yeah, you're going to start a Kansas City Chief no matter what player you have every week, just because that offense is crazy. Kelsey gets a nod versus Ben Watson. Dion Lewis talking shit about his former team in the post game. Didn't put up as many points as Theo Riddick. Interesting. And then
it's all about the win, Keith.
Yeah, the Chargers defense. So really the difference maker was Fournette of that whole thing.
Yeah, but not really because Fournette and Breida were a wash. Exactly. I think, you look at it overall, it was a close matchup. At the bottom, the defense gave him a little bit extra. Yeah. And besides that, he got a few extra points from Galladay and then a few extra from his quarterback. But you take away that, it was very close all the way through.
Truly was a toilet bowl.
Good win for John. And, if this was a punishment.
John had Baker on his bench. Baker went out for 30.
Yeah, that's true. They're both 2-8. If this was next year.
2-8 with Trickus at 3-7.
Wow. Gail Benedict 3-7 with 174 waiver moves.
174. Yeah, to me, just as a fantasy rule, I just stay as far as away from Andy Dalton as I can forever, because he's just going to disappoint.
Yeah, well, no AJ Green, no Tyler Eifert.
Yeah.
Some other injuries as well on
Tyler,
the team.
Tyler Eifert it's the same thing. He kills it for 3 games and gets hurt.
And then
every single year.
Yeah, it's disappointing. All right, so next matchup here, would be the 7th versus 8th Carpet Munchers versus our buddy here, Jon Snow. And Jon Snow ran away with that one in the end. What'd you think about that one, Josh?
Well, and just for clarification as well, these seedings are the current seedings. So
right, current.
The current 7 and 8. Jon Snow, who I told y'all last week, I had a feeling he was going to pull off the upset. He had a good game. I mean, I liked his matchups. I liked his players. Rodgers gave him 24. Tyreek gave him 28. Odell gave him 20. Tariq Cohen gave him 15. Hooper gave him 19. And his defense gave him 16. With all that being said, he had a 0 in his flex spot, and he still was able to win this game by 25 points, or 30 points. I'm sorry, 31 points.
No, 20 points.
137 to 116?
It's 21.
Yeah, it's 21.
It's 21 points. That's what I said. You guys are wrong. So anyway, on the other side, he had a good game from Goff. Kamara had a good game as well, but he really didn't get any other big games from anybody else. Only getting 3.47 from Jarvis Landry really hurts. That's somebody that you can usually count on every week for at least double digits. So Jarvis not performing up to par kind of hurt him big time. And also for Trim, I mean, getting a combined 16 points from your flex kicker and defense when Jake's defense scored 16 by themselves doesn't help causes at all. Overall, this puts both these teams in a precarious spot here. I mean, Jake's 4 and 6 at the 8 seed right now. He's going to have to win out to at least give himself a chance, where Bradley right now is just 1 game back from the top 6.
I'm not out of it. Not
out of it. No, you're not.
This definitely helps you. I mean, you climb 1 game on Brad. Brad's in a tough spot too. Looking at the rest of the season for these guys, I mean, their teams aren't bad. They both have
a couple
of guys on their bench. You are, because at your running back position, Cohen and Drake is kind of eh. And, Yeldon was still getting some burn time. What I noticed in that Jacksonville game is at the end when they were trying to come back, Yeldon was the back that was in the game. It wasn't Leonard Fournette. So, I mean, Yeldon's still going to hold a little bit of value. Exactly.
Yeah.
Looks like he's going to be the passing back. And honestly, the way that defense has looked recently and how anemic that offense has been, they're probably going to be behind for a lot of the games remaining. So TJ Yeldon's really not a bad play. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to play that guessing game every week of who do you start between Cohen, Drake, and Yeldon. Whereas on Trim's side, more clear cut at the running back position. I think it's a no-brainer with Kamara, even at this point with Duke Johnson Jr. But he's got good players. Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry, Jared Goff. I mean, Taj Boyd. Taj Boyd will do a little bit better if A.J. Green can get
Tyler
back.
Boyd.
Taj
Boyd was the quarterback from Clemson.
My bad. Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, everybody was hoping that dude was going to go off, but I think we talked about it either last week or the week before, how that A.J. Green injury, everybody thought that means Boyd goes off, but really all that meant was he's seeing their best secondary personnel. And
there's nobody else to take pressure off him in that offense.
Right.
Like I told you all last week. I mean, who else do they got? John Ross. And as a defensive coordinator, as a defensive, overall game plan, you're telling yourself, go ahead, let John Ross beat us. We're going to take away Boyd. We're going to take away Mixon. Go ahead and beat us with anybody else. And
John Ross had the only touchdown, I think, too.
Yeah. Yep. He had like 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. So
51-14. I mean, the Saints. Do not be surprised if the Saints are in the Super Bowl this year. They are one of the best teams in the league.
Not at all. All right, moving right along here. The next matchup would be Sean Archer versus Kiss the Baby, the current 4 seed versus the current 2nd seed. And I believe, Jake, you got that one?
Yeah, it looks like Jimmy didn't have a good day at all. And Sean Archer, I think after this week, he's going to be at the top of my power rankings as well. So he's probably going to hold the number 1 spot there for the power rankings.
Yeah.
He has the best team. So Jimmy didn't have a good day in general, but even if Jimmy had an above average day, Sean Archer was still going to win. His original projection was 152, which is pretty high for this league, and he ended up getting 162 or 161.
Largely because Aaron Jones exploded.
Well, that's the thing. He has He has a great team. He has the best team. He has Mahomes, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Aaron Jones, Barkley, Ertz, and Jeffrey.
Yeah.
That's his playoff team. That's his starting lineup. Pretty much Jones and Barkley swapped this week. I mean, normally Barkley's getting 20 plus, closer to 30, and Jones might get 12. So they kind of just switched roles. And then Michael Thomas, he's been killing it. He didn't get as much yards, but he got two touchdowns and one of the best offenses in the whole entire NFL. And then on top of that, he has Patrick Mahomes, who 26 points is probably his worst of the whole entire year. So,
and he still has Andrew Luck on his bench.
Yeah,
right.
Mahomes wasn't even the right start this week for him.
Yeah, he's got Andrew Luck on the bench. His team is so good that he has 4 defenses on his team. He has 3 defensive teams in his bench. That's how good his team is. So, on hindsight to that, obviously, if he has injuries with that starting lineup, he doesn't really have depth besides the quarterback. So, if for some reason injuries start occurring, that's the only thing that's going to prevent him from going all the way.
That or a bad week, which he's probably going to have this week coming up because he's playing against me, and I'm going to put the voodoo hex on him.
Yeah, you got to hope for that. The only other thing that could potentially hurt him is if, for some reason, any of these teams that have 1 or 2 losses decide to reel it in towards the end of the season.
But I don't think that's going to happen because there's too close of a race in the AFC. The Chiefs they have their divisional foe, the Chargers, not too far behind.
Yeah.
I know the Patriots just lost, but they're going to be there. You look on the other side, you got the Rams with 1 loss, you got the Saints with 1 loss, and then you got teams that aren't too far behind as well, like the Vikings. And even a team like the Packers, if they get hot and win out, they're going to be right there at 11, 12 wins, whatever it is.
And they can do that. I don't think that's going to be the case, but
I could see if. So I'm not saying they're not going to play in these games, but I could see Sean Payton benching a Michael Thomas and a Drew Brees in the third quarter of a game that's already won or that's already lost.
Yeah, but odds are Michael Thomas is going to have a touchdown before that third quarter. You know, that's the thing.
I'm saying that's the only way his team.
The only way that happens is if they're up by a lot, and if they're up by a lot, that's chances are Michael Thomas, Kamara, those guys are going to be the ones doing the scoring, and Drew Brees obviously. Yeah, so if that does happen, it's not going to be likely that they're on the losing side of that. But I mean, obviously it could happen. It's happened before. That same situation comes around every single year. Are they gonna bench the starters if they already have home field advantage? You know, are they gonna take them out early for the fourth quarter? It comes up every year. You never know. It's
matchups though too. I mean, look at the matchups this week for him. Aaron Jones 31.3 against the Dolphins. The Dolphins have had the worst rushing defense, especially for fantasy purposes, over like the last 8 weeks. Absolutely terrible. He goes off, you know. And then you look at it. I mean, Michael Thomas went against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's defense really hasn't been that great all year. You had Evans, surprisingly, didn't really put up much. But Washington's not bad. It's a good defense. Mahomes is the lowest total of the year. Yeah. Arizona they play tough.
Arizona has good
D back there.
They got defense.
They got great players too. Patrick Peterson's probably one of the best DBs in the entire league. San Fran at San Fran. Anytime you got to go on the road in prime time, it's not going to be easy. I think they just really game plan for Saquon, and they said, "Go ahead, Eli, beat us," and Eli did.
And Odell finally found the end zone multiple times. Yeah.
So it's about matchups. So, I mean, he could have some tough matchups down the stretch that could limit some of those guys, and that's really fantasy. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. There's always going to be variance. There's always going to be, injuries and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, matchups are the most important thing that you have to look at and break down for projection purposes. So, I mean, we don't really have the time to look at all his players individually, but it's not a given because they could have a tough game.
His team has the most players that you can just set and forget.
Absolutely.
What I mean?
Absolutely. And since we've done power rankings, he's been my number one guy since we've done it. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you.
He's not going in week to week and worried about matchups. He's like, I have 4 defenses on my bench because I don't care. It doesn't matter. My team's awesome.
Right.
So, and on the flip side for Jimmy, he had a really bad week. I think that we talked about it. A lot of his players are touchdown dependent. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey was the only person to do anything that whole game, and that was his top scorer, 34. Yep. So 34% of his scoring came from one person. And then after that, nobody really scored. And because of that, he had a low week, 106.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
And not only that, I mean, take a look. Every single one of his players were on the road this week, except for Joe Mixon, who was home against the Saints, who happened to have the number 1 rush defense in the league, and then his defense, which was San Francisco.
And Gio's back. Back. So
that I don't think that plays into. I think the Saints defense is that good. I mean, they're the number 1.
I'm just saying, if you're down, if you're Cincinnati and you're down 30 points and you have to go as fast, I don't know. I didn't watch the game.
No, Mixon's.
I don't know how many touches.
He was never in a timeshare. He's like 70-30, if any, but usually on the high side. But all his players are on the road, and on top of that, he had 4 players in the same game. He had 2 players on Atlanta who struggled at Cleveland, and he had 2 players on Carolina who obviously got blown out of Pittsburgh. And that's another thing that hurts you because both those teams struggled, and all those guys. I mean, when you have more than one player on that team, that can come back and bite you. On the flip side, let's say though, Atlanta put up 45 points against Cleveland. Yeah, all of a sudden, it's a different story. So that's the risk reward with that take. But talking about matchups, about Joe's team, I mean, just look at the matchup here in this game. I mean, Jimmy's entire team was on the road except for his one running back, which was going against the number 1 rush defense in the league. So just on paper, it was going to be a tough day, and don't overlook home field advantage, especially in the NFL. There really is something to it, unless it's a really bad team, of course, Yeah. But you do have to look at playing at home. You have to look at division opponents as well, if it's a divisional rivalry, because some teams records can get thrown out the window in division rivalries,
Right.
So little quirks you got to pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay, so the last matchup of the week here is
upset of the week.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that.
Upset of the week?
I don't think any of us
Power ranking upset of the week.
We'll give you that. I don't think.
What do you mean? We called it the last show. I said if I beat Trickus, it's going to be the upset of the week because the consensus was on Trickus. Y'all all had him in the power rankings, including myself. And then even Yahoo had him projected to crush me. Well, and you know what? We came out with a W.
Well, I'll ask you guys a question after we roll through this. But let's get right to it here. Cam versus Fitz. Trickus got the nod by 3 points in that one, even though Carolina got absolutely exposed in Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown and Devontae Adams beat out Deshaun Jackson and Valdez-Scantling as expected. Melvin Gordon and Josh Howard. Melvin did his thing. Jordan, yeah, you're right, Jordan Howard. Melvin did his thing. Jordan Howard essentially disappeared. And after all the moves you made and all the controversy and all the talks that we had about what the fuck you were doing, Mark Ingram had a day, and so did Kerryon Johnson.
Oh, what do you know? And you know what, Keith? I got to say, I commend you, and I respect the fact that you brought up all the shit that was talked and all the points that were made. It takes a man to do that because you're essentially admitting that you were completely wrong. And you were asking me on the last show, what was I thinking making these trades with my opponent this week? I actually had a little chat with Trickus earlier, and he also, as a man, acknowledged the fact that he single-handedly beat himself this week because Kerryon Johnson and Mark Ingram were both his running backs before the weekend started. And they both ended up on my team. Why? True. Because I'm a G. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I mean... If you ask me, well, I mean, we talked about it before. Kerryon Johnson was projected 9 points, which is makes sense to me going into Chicago with Khalil Mack and all those boys. But he had a rushing and receiving touchdown. So,
okay, so let me say this too, because this goes right into Mark Ingram. One thing about projections is, for the most part, they're usually accurate somewhat, but I never look at projections. You should never read too much into projections because at the end of the day, that's all they are. It's a projection. What I look at is actual statistics, especially at this point in the season when you have, half the season gone. You have you have reliable stats to look back on. So if you look at Kerryon Johnson over the last 5 to 6 weeks, he's had, going back to week 3, really, 16 carries, 9 carries, 12 carries, 19 carries, 8 carries where he got banged up, and then 12, 14 carries. He's averaging right around 13, 14 carries a game. Right. When you look at Mark Ingram, I brought this up last week when you asked me, why I was making the moves or talking about, Mark Ingram in the Saints backfield. He's, since he came back from that PED suspension, 16, 12, 13, 9, and 13 carries. He's going to get 14, 15 carries a game. That's part of their game plan. They're going to give him the ball 14, 15 times. I'll take Mark Ingram, even though he's technically the second running back. Alvin Kamara is the highest ceiling back in that backfield.
Right.
I'll still take a back on one of the best offenses in the league that's going to get 14, 15 carries a game. Same thing with Kerryon Johnson. I mean, not that Detroit's a great offense, but here's a guy that they drafted who, when healthy, especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks, they've shown that they're making it a point to give him the football. They want him to develop, they want him to be the workhorse, and they want to give him the ball. So, I mean, really, Trickus, the move that he made was foolish. And I'm not saying this to really rag on him, but I mean, he gave up, again, a guy in one of the best offenses in the league that was going to get 14, 15 touches a game to replace with Jordan Howard. I don't understand why you would do that. I don't know. He was so eager to get rid of Mark Ingram because of the one bad game. You know, when he got hit, he got hurt.
Clearly an overreaction. Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that he does, and that's something that I notice a lot of poor players will do in fantasy. It's the overreaction. Okay. Yeah. The 1 week over. Okay. One guy has a bad game, or, he doesn't get targeted, or he just, whatever it is, or maybe he tweaks his ankle and he's questionable, and then guys just try to get rid of him. They get scared or for whatever reason. Those are the guys you want to manipulate and take advantage of in your fantasy leagues, because you're going to get tons of value for dirt cheap. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I stole Mark Ingram and Kerryon Johnson from Trickus, but I mean, It was like taking candy from a baby. I really didn't have to try too hard to do it.
It worked for you for this week. We'll see.
I had to give up value to get it too.
Where that goes.
So
yeah.
Jordan Howard, he's very touchdown dependent. He'll get anywhere from 10 to 15 touches a game, but they're just not. He's really not that good of a back. They don't have a good running system. And this week he had 3 points because Tariq Cohen, who's their passing back, had like 3 or 4 rushing attempts for like 8 yards, but he scored. It was like on the goal line. Right. So he took the Howard touchdown away.
Yeah. What does that say when they're giving Cohen goal line touches?
Well, I think it's obvious if you watch those backs. Howard doesn't have explosiveness. Tariq Cohen, if you get him in the open field, he can break quick. He's quick. He's fast. I mean, he could outrun anybody. He could pull a 70, 80-yard touchdown, in the blink of an eye.
Like 2 or 3 times this year.
Yeah. Exactly. Howard can't do that. No. Howard doesn't have that explosiveness. Howard is essentially he's very much like a LeGarrette Blount. He's a very big back. He's you know what I mean. He's going to pound the rock. If you want to get 2-3 yards,
red zone
that's
running
fine.
Back.
Exactly. That's a red zone running back, and those guys really don't have a ton of value in fantasy football, especially in today's day and age where it's a passing league at every aspect. So it's tough. Yeah. But Keith, why don't you talk about my other acquisition I made this week?
What, Brandin Cooks?
Yeah. Because you asked me what I was doing getting rid of Antonio Brown,
I did. And, I mean,
I got Diggs on the bench, too, just so you know.
I know who your team is. And
okay. I better get some respect in the power rankings this week. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, clearly, Mike Davis, we'll see. The Seattle running back situation is so hard to predict. It's literally, if Chris Carson is healthy, all of a sudden they give him the ball a lot, and then they still get Mike Davis in there, and Rashad Penny emerges this week. He's going to be
a big game.
Yeah, he's
going to be a hot pickup, and then next week Mike Davis gets 25 carries.
Exactly. So I mean, he gave him 17 points. It still wasn't enough. Brandin Cooks, obviously, with that offense, and now Cooper Kupp out. Who knows how that affects him?
I think more usage for Cooks, definitely.
Yeah, probably, and for Robert Woods. So.
But they use Cooks. I mean, they use Woods too a lot on those jet sweeps. But that's one thing about that offense I like as well. One of Cooks' touchdowns was on that jet sweep. He got credit for a reception. Or
Yeah.
no, it was a handoff. That's right. It was
Yeah.
a rushing touchdown.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of little gimmick plays like that. And I mean, Cooks is a speed guy, of course. So I mean, I really like his ceiling. I like Cooks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the New Orleans or the Rams. I mean, or the Chiefs offense. If you have any part of that offense, it's obviously nice because they put up so many points that odds are your dude's gonna go off.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, pulled out the win there by
Yeah,
what?
I like your
11
your
points.
team, Fidelity.
Mhm.
It's definitely better
I like
than it
it.
was.
You definitely improved it. We'll see how far your wide receiving core take you.
Well, like I said,
That
that
was
was with
fine.
Get
that
Stephon
was with Diggs on the
Diggs.
bench.
Diggs with Kirk Cousins, that stack combo coming back,
Yeah,
and Valdez-Scantling's a good wide receiver. He's just this week he
number
only
2
had
right now.
6 for 44, but that's just a product of that offense. He could go for 20, 30 points.
And that game flow too. They didn't have to throw much in the second half.
Yeah.
They just dominated Miami that game.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's a number 2.
They just
Miami had
announced,
4 field, I think.
They just announced
Mhm.
earlier today that Randall Cobb isn't even traveling with the team to Seattle. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. I mean, Seattle is obviously hard to play in.
Regardless, even if Cobb is there, he's still the number 2 wide receiver.
Right, yeah.
Right. Cobb's
Yeah.
playing the slot. He's
Yeah.
not playing outside. So, I mean, I like him, going forward for the year. Like I said, I had Antonio Brown, and to have, Cooks, Diggs, and then these guys over here, even Deshaun Jackson, who's got some value and has a ceiling, he could have a big game too. So it's
He
just
didn't do
about
bad.
playing the matchups.
He got
every
his
week.
projection.
Yeah. And I mean, and that was with a team that didn't score an offensive touchdown
right.
the entire game.
So you throw a TD in there, he gets 15.
Yeah.
Yep.
Trickus
that's a win.
didn't. I mean, he played his best team too. He didn't really leave any points on the bench. So
No, he left some
it's all
points
right,
there.
buddy.
He could have, if he didn't play Howard, move Davis to there, put Lockett in the flex.
Oh yeah,
He beats
could've
me.
done that.
He
He beats you.
he would have
Yeah,
won.
That's true.
But,
That's true.
and essentially that would have happened if he didn't make those trades. He would have played Lockett. Brown wouldn't have been there. He would have had Carry-On and Ingram probably.
Yeah.
And he crushes me.
And,
Yep.
Hey.
Kudos to you, buddy. So, before this weekend's games, we got together and we decided that if Trickus won, we were going to allow him to have a cameo on the show and kind of
But he
defend
didn't.
himself. But he
So-
lost. So are we holding to that? And we're
Yes, we're
denying him
holding to
access?
that.
Okay.
Of course.
Absolutely. He doesn't
What do you
get
think
a
this
chance
is?
now.
Charity
You got to
event?
win to get in.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you got to win to get in. And he didn't win. So that's what that is.
Yep.
So the current standings as they sit are Dorf still number 1 at 8-2, Sean Archer at 7-3, and he's gonna, if he just keeps doing what he's doing, he has 160 more points than Dorf. So I
That's like
imagine,
an extra week.
right. I imagine he's gonna take the number 1 seed shortly here. Then me at 3, Jimmy at 4, Nico at 5, Josh here at 6, Trim at 7, Jake at 8, Don Juan at 9, Trickus at 10, John at 11, and Thorpe at 12. So that is the current state of our league of Salary Jerry Saturdays. You guys have anything to say before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just to go back over the last week predictions. First week we were 5 for 6. Last week we were 3 for 6.
Yeah.
So hopefully for our week 11 forecast, we could come up with some better predictions, guys. But overall, it's a good week.
Yeah. A lot of parity this weekend. A lot of trap games. A la Cleveland. A la Carolina. Just weird shit going down.
What does Allah have to do with this?
All right. Therefore, So,
You're such a dink.
but yeah. What about you, Josh?
It's,
you have anything you want to get out there?
No, just, it's going to be a fun finish of the season. I'm excited. In this league and the other one that the majority of these guys are in, the East Coast Elite, we have the 2 through the 7 seed are all tied in that league.
Right, and you're the 8th seed, and you're 2 games behind the first. So.
Exactly, and I mean, you look at this league; it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, up top, it's a little bit different. I mean, with Sean Archer and Got You Thielen Gurley, and even you at the 3 seed. But anything could happen over these next few weeks. Because honestly, you take away Sean Archer, I think he's in a tier by himself. And then the rest of the teams, all the way, I mean, Got You Thielen Gurley, Absolute Units, Kiss the Baby, Hank Mardukas, myself, Carpet Munchers, Jon Snow, Don Juan, even the guys 10 through 12, Gail Benedict, Balls Deep, or Blue Jesus Chicken Wing. Any one of those rosters can go off at any given point in time. I mean, it's pretty balanced. There's a lot of parity. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens these next few weeks. Really, Trim's right alive, only 1 game back at the 7 seed. Jon Snow's still alive. And even Don Juan at the 9 seed, because again, at 4 and 6, if you win 3 in a row to finish the season, 7 and 6 is probably going to get in. It usually does. So there's definitely hope there. All the way down to the 9 seed right now. It's going to be a fun finish. So looking forward to it. And you know, if Trickus, you still want to make any trades, man, just hit me up. Let me know.
Right.
See you, boys.
Okay, so there you have it. There's our Week 10 recap. And this is the Sailor Jerry Saturdays Fantasy Football Show. We are out of here.